The entire restaurant went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. 1 minute, Vittorio Moretti, the most feared man in the city, was screaming at a trembling waitress, mocking his own son's disability to humiliate her. He laughed in her face, daring her to communicate with the boy he called broken. He thought he had the power. He thought she was nobody. But when that waitress raised her hands, she didn't beg for mercy. She signed 3 words that changed the fate of the entire Chicago underworld. Vittorio didn't know it yet, but he hadn't just insulted a server. He had just handed the keys to his empire to the one woman capable of destroying him. This is the story of the silence that screamed louder than a gunshot. Rain lashed against the greasy windows of O'Malley's Chop House, a mid-tier steakhouse in downtown Chicago that served politicians during the day and laundered money for the cartel at night. It was 8:00 p.m. on a Tuesday, usually a quiet shift, but tonight the air was thick enough to choke on. Elena Corves wiped down the counter, her eyes stinging from the stale smoke that clung to the velvet booths. She was 24, with hair the color of burnt espresso, pulled back in a severe bun, and a uniform that had seen better days. To the patrons, she was invisible a pair of hands, delivering scotch and ribeyes. That was exactly how she liked it. Invisibility was safety. The bell above the door didn't just jingle, it seemed to shiver. The heavy oak door swung open, and the atmosphere in the room instantly depressurized. Conversation stopped. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. Even the grill cook in the back seemed to freeze. Vittorio Moretti had arrived. He was a mountain of a man wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than Eleanor's entire education. His face was a roadmap of violence, a jagged scar running from his ear to his jaw, eyes like polished coal. He didn't walk. He marched, claiming territory with every step. Trailing behind him like a shadow tethered to a beast was a young man. He was younger, perhaps 25. He was lean where Vittorio was bulky, wearing a simple black turtleneck and a dark coat. His features were sharper, elegant, but cold, his eyes fixed on the floor. This was Leo Moretti, the ghost, the broken prince. Rumors swirled around him like flies that he was deaf-mute, mentally unstable, or simply a soulless killer in training. "Table 4. Vittorio barked, not asking. The host, a sweating man named Gary, scrambled. "Of course, Mr. Moretti, right this way." They sat in the center of the room. Vittorio sprawled out, taking up space, while Leo sat with perfect rigid posture, his hands folded on the white tablecloth. "Girl." Vittorio snapped his fingers. Elena didn't flinch. She grabbed her pad and walked over her face, a mask of professional boredom. "Welcome to O'Malley's. Can I start you with a drink? Scotch. Neat. Leave the bottle." Vittorio grunted. He looked at his son with open disdain. "And get him water. He doesn't know the difference anyway." Elena wrote it down. Her eyes flicked to Leo. He was looking out the window at the rain, his expression unreadable, completely detached from his father's aggression. "Is he hungry?" Elena asked, her voice steady. Vittorio laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Hungry who knows he's a defective mute. The doctors say he's deaf, I say he's just stupid." Vittorio leaned forward, his breath reeking of peppermint and rot. "Why don't you ask him, sweetheart? Go on. Talk to my deaf son. Ask him if he wants the steak or if he'd prefer to go play in traffic." The restaurant watched. It was a cruel game. Vittorio loved to humiliate staff to make them uncomfortable by forcing them to interact with the son he despised. Elena looked at Vittorio, then turned her full attention to Leo. Vittorio smirked, waiting for her to shout, to wave her hands like a frantic bird to embarrass herself. "Go on, yell. Maybe it'll penetrate that thick skull." Elena didn't yell. She didn't speak. She squared her shoulders, took a breath, and raised her hands. Her fingers moved with fluid lightning speed, the gestures crisp and elegant. "Do you wish to order food, or shall I bring you a knife to stab your father?" Leo's head snapped up, for the first time since entering the young man's eyes locked onto hers. They weren't empty. They were storm grey and burning with sudden sharp intelligence. The mask of the broken boy slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing a predator. His hands moved beneath the table, then rose. Slowly, deliberately. Carbonara, extra black pepper, and poison for him if you have it. Elena didn't smile, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She nodded once. She turned back to Vittorio, who was staring at her, his mouth slightly open. The arrogance was replaced by confusion. "He wants the carbonara," Elena said, her voice cool and flat. "And he says you're too loud." The silence that followed was absolute. Vittorio looked from Elena to Leo and back to Elena. His face turned a dangerous shade of purple. He stood up his chair, scraping violently against the floor. "You understand him," Vittorio whispered, the sound more terrifying than his shout. "My brother was deaf," Elena lied smoothly, clutching her notepad to her chest. "It's just a language, sir. Not a magic trick." Vittorio stared at her. He looked at her hands, red from scrubbing dishes, callus-free on the palms. He looked at her eyes, intelligent, defiant. "What is your name?" "Elena." Vittorio reached into his jacket. For a second, the room braced for a gun. Instead, he pulled out a money clip. He peeled off $500 bills and threw them on the table. "Get out," he said to the room at large. "Everyone, out!" Patrons scrambled. The host ran to the back. Within 30 seconds, O'Malley's was empty, save for Vittorio, Leo, and Elena. "You're not a waitress," Vittorio said, walking around the table to circle her like a shark. "I am," Elena insisted, though her legs felt like water. "I just serve food." "No." Vittorio stopped in front of her. He looked at his son, who was watching Elena with an intensity that could cut glass. "You're the first person he's responded to in 3 years. 3 years. Vittorio grabbed Elena's chin. His grip was iron. "You're fired," Vittorio said. "Excuse me. You're fired from this dump. You work for me now." Elena didn't have a choice. When the Moretti family hires you, you don't hand in a 2-week notice. You get in the car. 2 hours later, she was sitting in the back of a sprawling estate in the Chicago suburbs, a fortress of limestone and high-tech security gates. The trip had been silent. Leo had sat next to her in the SUV, neither of them signing a single word, but the air between them vibrated with unspoken questions. She was ushered into a study that smelled of old leather and gun oil. Vittorio sat behind a massive mahogany desk. "Here is the deal," Vittorio said, lighting a cigar. "My son is 25. He is the heir to the Moretti syndicate. But he is—" Vittorio waved his hand dismissively. "Useless. He went deaf when he was 12. An explosion. It took his hearing and his mother. He hasn't spoken a vocal word since. He signs, but he refuses to sign to me. He refuses to sign to my lieutenants. He sits. He stares. He wastes space." Elena stood straight, her hands clasped behind her back. "And you want me to be what nanny, a translator," Vittorio corrected. "We have a merger coming up. The Kovacs family from New York. They smell weakness. If they see Leo is a cripple who can't communicate, they will try to kill us and take the territory. I need him to look competent. I need him to understand the negotiations. You will be his voice." "I'm not a criminal, Mr. Moretti. I'm a linguistics dropout." "You are whatever I say you are." Vittorio slammed his hand on the desk. "I looked into you, Elena Corvez. Dropout from Northwestern. Debts piling up. Sick mother in a care home in Ohio. You need money. I'll pay for your mother's care for the rest of her life. You refuse. Well, accidents happen in nursing homes all the time. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. It wasn't a job offer. It was a hostage situation. I need access to him, she said, her voice trembling slightly. If I'm going to translate for him, I need to know how he thinks. He's not a dog you can just command. He's in the West Wing, guarded. Don't try to run Elena. My eyes are everywhere. Elena was dismissed. A guard, a towering man named Bronson, escorted her to the West Wing. The West Wing was different from the rest of the house. It was modern, minimalist, and starkly white. It felt less like a home and more like a laboratory. She found Leo in what looked like a library. He was standing by a fireplace, tossing a coin in the air and catching it. Over and over. Clink. Catch. Clink. Catch. He didn't turn when she entered. He felt the vibration of her footsteps on the hardwood. Elena walked around him, so she was in his line of sight. Your father thinks he bought me, she signed. Leo stopped tossing the coin. He looked her up and down, his gaze, analyzing her posture, her shoes, her hands. He buys everyone, Leo signed back. His signing style was casual shorthand, almost lazy, a stark contrast to the formal signing he had used in the restaurant. How much did you cost my mother's life? Elena signed. He threatened her. Leo's expression shifted. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a flicker of shared pain. He slipped the coin into his pocket. He is a monster, Leo signed. But he is a stupid monster. That is his weakness. And what are you? Elena asked. The victim, Leo, stepped closer. He was taller than he looked sitting down. He smelled of rain and expensive cologne. He leaned down his face, inches from hers. He didn't sign. He reached out and tapped the side of his own head, then pointed to the door where his father's guards stood. He moved his hand slowly so the guards wouldn't interpret the speed as aggression. I am not the victim, Elena. I am the one waiting for him to make a mistake. And you are the first interesting thing to happen in this prison in a decade. Why did you answer me in the restaurant? She asked. Leo smirked. It was a devastating, handsome look that transformed his face. Because you didn't look at me with pity. You looked at me like I was dangerous. I liked that. Suddenly the door burst open. Vittorio stormed in, followed by two men carrying boxes of files. Enough flirting, Vittorio barked, oblivious to the silence. Work starts now. These are the ledgers for the Kovacs deal. Leo needs to know the numbers. Teach him. Vittorio dumped the files on the table and left. Elena looked at the files. They were complex laundering schemes, shipping routes, payoff schedules. She looked at Leo. He picked up a file, glanced at the first page for 2 seconds, and tossed it aside. Boring, he signed. You need to learn this, Eleanor signed. Leo walked over to a grand piano in the corner of the room. He sat down. He placed his hands on the keys. He couldn't hear the music, but he could feel the resonance. He began to play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. It was flawless, haunting. I don't need to learn the numbers, Elena, he signed with one hand while playing the melody with the other. I wrote them. Elena froze. What Leo stopped playing. He turned to her, his eyes cold and hard. My father thinks I am brain damaged. He lets me sit in the room while he discusses everything. I run the accounts. I move the money. I am the reason this family hasn't gone bankrupt. He is the face. I am the brain, and he has no idea. Elena realized then the magnitude of the situation. Vittorio was the brute force, but Leo was the puppet master living in silence, and she was the only one who knew. The next 2 weeks were a blur of high tension and secret conversations. By day, Elena played the role of the submissive tutor. She sat with Leo in the study, while Vittorio paced around shouting instructions. Elena would translate Vittorio's crude demands into ASL, and Leo would give simple monosyllabic responses, which Elena would voice back to Vittorio. "Tell him he needs to wear the grey suit for the meeting," Vittorio would yell. Elena would sign, "He wants you to wear the grey suit to hide the bloodstains he expects." Leo would keep a straight face, signing back, "Tell him grey washes him out." Elena would say aloud, "He agrees, sir." It was a dangerous game. They were building a language within a language, a bond forged in the shadow of a tyrant. Elena learned that Leo wasn't just smart, he was a genius. He tracked global markets, crypto wallets, and shipping lanes from a laptop his father thought he used for video games. But the Kovacs meeting was approaching, and the tension in the house was shifting. One evening, Elena was in her temporary bedroom, a lavish guest suite that locked from the outside. She was reading a book when the lock clicked. She sat up, expecting a guard. It was Leo. He slipped inside and locked the door behind him. He was wearing sleeping pants and a t-shirt, his hair messy. He looked vulnerable younger. "What are you doing?" she whispered, then realized her mistake and raised her hands. "You can't be here. If your father finds you." Leo shook his head. "The cameras are on a loop. I hacked the security system 3 years ago. We have 10 minutes. He sat on the edge of her bed. The distance between them felt electric. "Why are you really here, Elena?" he signed. "My father threatens people all the time. Usually they run. Or they break. You are getting stronger." "I have no choice," she signed. "He has my mother." Leo's face darkened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. He handed it to her. It was a printout of a bank transfer. A massive sum sent to a private care facility in Ohio. "I bought the facility Leo signed. Your mother is safe. My men loyal only to me are watching the building. Vittorio cannot touch her." Elena stared at the paper tears pricking her eyes. She looked up at him. "Why? Because I need a partner, not a servant." Leo reached out and took her hand. His skin was warm, his grip firm. He turned her hand over and traced the lines of her palm. "The meeting with Kovacs isn't a merger." Leo signed his movements sharp. "It's an execution. Vittorio plans to kill Kovacs. But Kovacs knows. He is bringing a bomb. He plans to level the building." Elena pulled her hand back, horrified. "We have to tell your father. No, Leo signed. If we tell him, he will start a war that kills thousands. I have a different plan. But I need your voice, literally. What do you need me to do?" "At the meeting you will be translating. I will say one thing. You must say exactly what I tell you, even if it sounds like suicide." "Do you trust me?" Elena looked at this man, this silent, terrifying, beautiful man, who had lived in the dark for so long. She realized that she wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was falling for the king in waiting. "I trust you," she signed. Leo leaned in. For a moment, she thought he would kiss her. He hesitated, his eyes searching hers, filled with a longing that words couldn't capture. He brushed a stray hair from her face. "Good," he signed. "Because tomorrow we take the crown." The venue for the summit was the Apex, a penthouse boardroom atop the tallest, brutalist tower in the Chicago Loop. It was neutral ground, technically owned by a shell company that Leo had quietly acquired 6 months prior. To Vittorio, however, it was just another rental. The rain from the previous night had turned into a sleet storm, battering the floor-to-ceiling glass walls. The city below was a smear of grey and neon, oblivious to the fact that its fate was being decided 500 feet in the air. Elena stood slightly behind Leo's chair. Her heart was beating so hard she felt it in her throat. She wore a severe black dress. Vittorio had selected something that made her look like part of the furniture. Leo wore a charcoal suit tailored to perfection, hiding the lean muscle that Elena now knew was a weapon. Vittorio sat at the head of the obsidian table, drinking espresso, looking bored. "Remember," Vittorio muttered to Elena, not looking at her. "You are a parrot. You repeat what I say to the boy. You repeat what the boy thinks to me. If you improvise, you die." "Yes, sir," Elena said softly. The elevator doors at the far end of the room dinged. Nikolai Kovac walked in. He was a bear of a man, older than Vittorio, with skin that looked like tanned leather, and eyes that had seen too many winters in a Siberian gulag. He was flanked by 4 men who looked more like military contractors than mobsters. Vittorio didn't stand. "Nikolai, you look terrible." Kovac smiled, revealing gold-capped teeth. "And you, Vittorio, look like a man who doesn't know he's already a ghost." The tension in the room spiked instantly. Hands drifted toward suit jackets. Kovac sat at the opposite end. He placed a heavy metal briefcase on the table. He didn't open it. He just rested his heavy hand on top of it. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Kovac grunted. "You want the shipping lanes in the harbor. I want the unions in the meatpacking district. We trade. We drink. We go home." Vittorio laughed. "I take the harbor. You keep the scraps I leave you. That is the deal." Vittorio snapped his fingers at Elena. "Tell the boy to pay attention. This is how men do business." Elena looked at Leo. He was staring at the metal briefcase under Kovac's hand. His eyes were narrowed. "He isn't breathing." Leo signed his movements, barely perceptible against his chest. "Kovac, look at his neck. He is holding his breath. He is waiting for a timer." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The bomb she signed back, keeping her hands low. "Yes," Leo signed. "Tell my father Kovac accepts the deal." Elena froze. That wasn't what Kovac had said. Kovac hadn't accepted anything. "What did he say?" Vittorio barked at Elena. "Leo says—" Elena stammered, then steadied her voice. "Leo observes that Mr. Kovac seems eager to close the deal. He believes Kovac accepts your terms." Vittorio grinned, arrogant and blind. "See, even the half-wit can see you're desperate, Nikolai." Kovac frowned, confused. He hadn't agreed to anything. He tapped the briefcase. "I think your son is mistaken. Or perhaps you are just deaf to reality, Vittorio." "Sign the papers," Vittorio demanded, sliding a folder across the obsidian table. Kovac looked at the folder, then at his watch. "I have a better counteroffer." Kovac opened the latches of the briefcase. Click, click. The room went silent. Inside wasn't paper. It was a block of C4 explosive with a digital timer counting down from 2 minutes. "The offer," Kovac said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "is that we all die together. My empire is crumbling, Vittorio. If I cannot have Chicago, you certainly won't." Vittorio's guards drew their weapons instantly. Kovac's men did the same. It was a Mexican standoff in a glass cage. "Shoot him!" Vittorio screamed, standing up and overturning his chair. "Shoot me!" Kovac laughed, his finger hovering over a trigger mechanism wired to the case. "And the dead man's switch blows us into the sky instantly." Vittorio froze. The sweat broke out on his forehead instantly. He was a bully, not a martyr. He looked around wildly. "Leo!" Vittorio screamed at his son. "Do something! You're the math genius! Disarm it!" Leo didn't move. He sat calmly, crossing his legs. He looked at the bomb, then at his father, then at Elena. The timer ticked. 1:45. 1:44. Vittorio was hyperventilating. "Elena, tell him to fix this. Tell him I command him." Elena looked at Leo. The chaos of the shouting men, the guns pointed at heads, the impending death. It all faded when she locked eyes with him. Leo raised his hands. He signed to the entire room, big, broad gestures. Translation, Elena. Loudly. Elena took a breath. She stepped forward, between the gunmen. Leo says, Elena's voice rang out clear and steady, that the wiring on the C4 is amateur work. Blue wire to the detonator, red to the power source. It's a loop circuit. Kovac sneered. Smart boy, but you can't get near it without me letting go. Leo stood up. He walked toward Kovac. He's going to get us killed, Vittorio shrieked. Get back here, you defect. Leo didn't stop. He walked right up to the barrel of the gun held by Kovac's chief bodyguard. He gently pushed the barrel aside. He looked down at Kovac. Leo signed. He asks, Elena translated her voice trembling slightly, if you checked your bank account in the last 10 minutes, Nikolai. Kovac blinked. What? Leo pulled a smartphone from his pocket and turned the screen toward Kovac. He says, Elena continued reading Leo's rapid-fire signs, that 5 minutes ago your offshore accounts in the Caymans were liquidated. Your family in New York has been moved to a secure location by the Moretti shadow firm. Kovac went pale. That's impossible. No one knows about the shadow firm. That's a myth. Leo smiled. It was a terrifying, cold smile. He pointed to himself. I am the shadow firm, Elena translated. Leo leaned over the bomb. 0:30 seconds. He reached out. Kovac flinched but didn't detonate. He was too stunned by the revelation that he was bankrupt. Leo grabbed the blue wire and ripped it out. The timer stopped at 0:12. The room let out a collective breath. Vittorio, realizing he was alive, instantly regained his bravado. Good boy, I knew he could do it. Vittorio pulled his gold-plated pistol. Now kill this Russian pig. Vittorio aimed at Kovac. No, a voice said. It wasn't Elena. It was Leo. He didn't speak the word. He slammed his hand onto the obsidian table, the vibration rattling the coffee cups. He looked at his father with eyes that burned with years of silent rage. He signed one single decisive motion. Stop. And then the unthinkable happened. The 4 guards standing behind Vittorio, men who had served the Moretti family for 20 years, raised their guns and pointed them at Vittorio. What is this? Vittorio lowered his gun, looking at his head of security. Bronson. Bronson. Are you drunk? Point that at the Russian. Bronson didn't blink. Sorry, boss. The paycheck cleared this morning. It had a different signature on it. Vittorio looked at Leo. You pay them, with what money I give you, an allowance. Elena stepped forward. She felt a surge of power. She was no longer just the translator. She was the herald of the new king. He doesn't use your allowance, Vittorio, Elena said, dropping the sir. He invested it. Bitcoin in 2011. Tech startups. Shorting the housing market. While you were shaking down grocery stores for pennies, Leo built $1 billion empire from his bedroom. Vittorio staggered back, hitting the glass wall. The rain lashed against his back. He looked small. I am your father, Vittorio roared. I made you. Leo walked around the table. He moved with a grace that was almost supernatural. He stood in the center of the room, Kovac slumped in defeat on one side, Vittorio cornered on the other. Leo began to sign. This time he didn't use the shorthand. He used formal, poetic, grand gestures. He was conducting a symphony of vengeance. Elena translated her voice, gaining strength with every word. He says, Elena began, that you did not make him. You broke him. You took his hearing with your carelessness with explosives. You took his mother because you were too arrogant to check the car for traps. You left him in silence for 13 years, thinking he was weak. Leo stepped closer to his father. He says, Elena continued, tears stinging her eyes, as she voiced Leo's pain. That silence is not weakness. Silence is observation. While you were shouting, he was listening to the things people didn't say. He knows where the bodies are buried. He knows the codes to the vaults. He knows the names of the judges you bribed. Vittorio's face twisted into a snarl. He raised his gun again, aiming it at Leo's chest. "I'll make another son, a better one." Bang! The shot deafened the room. Elena screamed, but Leo didn't fall. Vittorio dropped his gun, clutching his hand. He howled in pain. Bronson stood there, smoke rising from his barrel. He had shot the gun right out of Vittorio's hand. Leo didn't flinch at the gunshot. He couldn't hear it. He only saw the recoil. He watched his father crumble to his knees, cradling his shattered hand. Leo looked at Kovac. "Get out," Leo signed. Elena translated. "Leave. Chicago is mine. If you return, the IRS gets your tax files." Kovac didn't argue. He grabbed his empty briefcase and ran his men trailing behind him like beaten dogs. Now it was just the Moretti men, the loyal guards, and Elena. Leo stood over his father. Vittorio looked up, eyes wide with fear for the first time in his life. He saw the broken boy towering over him like a god of war. Leo looked at Elena. He gestured for her to come closer. She walked to his side. He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. It was a statement. "She is with me." Leo looked down at his father and signed one final message. "He says," Elena whispered, the room dead quiet, "that you are retired. You will go to the estate. You will live in the West Wing. You will have a nurse, and you will never ever speak to the outside world again." Vittorio spat at Leo's shoes. "I am the Don. They will never follow a cripple." Leo looked at Bronson and the other guards. He raised an eyebrow. Bronson holstered his weapon and bowed his head. "Waiting for orders, Don Leo." The other guards followed suit. "Don Leo." Leo looked back at his father. He didn't smile. He simply turned his back. He pulled Eleanor toward the exit. "We have work to do," he signed to her. "What about him?" Elena asked, looking back at the sobbing, broken man on the floor. Leo didn't look back. "He is just noise," Leo signed. "And I don't hear noise." They walked out of the penthouse, the elevator doors closing on the old regime. As the elevator descended, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a trembling exhaustion. Elena leaned against the mirrored wall. Leo turned to her. He reached out and touched her cheek. His thumb brushed over her lip. "You were brave," he signed. "I was terrified," she admitted, speaking aloud so he could read her lips. "That is why it was brave," he signed. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened to a lobby full of people, hotel guests, staff, normal people living normal lives. They had no idea that 40 floors above them, the underworld had just changed hands. They walked out into the rainy Chicago night. A black limousine was waiting. Bronson was already there, holding the door open. "Where to, boss?" Bronson asked. Leo looked at Elena. He gestured to her. "You choose." "My mother," Elena said. "I want to see my mother." Leo nodded. He signed to Bronson. "To the care facility." Inside the car, the city lights blurred past. Leo didn't let go of her hand, but as they crossed the bridge, Leo's phone buzzed. He checked it. His face hardened. He showed the screen to Eleanor. It was a text message. "Unknown number. You think you took the crown, little prince. But you forgot one thing. The wolf has a brother." Eleanor looked at him. "Who is the wolf?" Kovac Leo signed. "But Kovac has no brothers. He killed them all." "Then who sent this?" Leo looked out the window. The victory was short-lived. The war wasn't over. It had just mutated. "Someone who knows about the shadow firm," Leo signed. "Someone who has been watching me watch them." He squeezed her hand tight. The silence is over, Elena. Now the world screams. Power, Elena learned quickly, was not about noise, it was about gravity. In the 3 months since the coup at the apex, the Chicago underworld had shifted on its axis. The chaotic, violent shouting matches of Vittorio Moretti were gone. In their place was the terrified silence of Leo Moretti's reign. They called it the quiet era. Leo ruled from the west wing of the estate, which had been converted into a command center that rivaled the Pentagon. Banks of servers hummed in temperature-controlled rooms, processing data from shipping containers in the Atlantic to crypto mines in Estonia. Elena was no longer just a translator. She was the gatekeeper. She sat at her own desk adjacent to Leo's, reviewing the personnel files for the new security detail. The nameplate on her desk didn't say assistant, it said partner. Leo was standing by the wall of monitors, tracking a shipment of semiconductors moving through the port of Newark. He was drinking green tea, his movements calm, precise. He looked like a tech CEO, not a mafia don. But Elena knew better. She knew that with a flick of his wrist he could bankrupt a senator or vanish a rival. But the text message from the night of the coup still haunted them. The wolf has a brother. They had scrubbed the city for threats. Kovacs was gone, reportedly drinking himself to death in a dacha near Moscow. Vittorio was a vegetable, living in a medicated haze in the East Wing, drooling into a bib while nurses changed his sheets. So who was the wolf? Suddenly, the hum of the servers changed pitch. It was a subtle sound, something only Leo, sensitive to vibration, would notice. He stiffened. He placed his hand flat against the server rack. Pulse he signed to Elena, his face grim. The rhythm changed. "Someone is inside," Elena typed furiously on her keyboard. "I don't see any unauthorized logins. The firewalls are holding." Leo shook his head. He moved to his main terminal. His fingers flew across the keys. Not a login he signed. A mirror. "Someone is copying us in real time. Look at the latency." Elena pulled up the network diagnostics. There it was, a phantom data stream, siphoning off everything. Every ledger, every bribe, every location of every lieutenant. "Trace it," Elena said, her heart hammering. Leo worked for 2 minutes, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's bouncing," he signed. "Singapore, London, Dubai." Wait, it's terminating locally. Where Leo turned the screen to her, a map of Chicago appeared. A single red dot pulsed. It wasn't in a warehouse or a rival's headquarters. The dot was pulsing at the St. Jude's care facility. Elena stopped breathing. My mother. The drive to the nursing home was a blur of terrifying speed. This time they didn't take the limousine. They took an armored SUV. Bronson drove his knuckles white on the wheel. Leo sat in the back with Eleanor, checking the chamber of a Sig Sauer P320. He handed a smaller Glock 19 to Elena. "I don't shoot," Elena said, her voice shaking. Leo looked at her, his grey eyes intense. "Today you might have to," he signed. "Whoever this is, they aren't attacking my money. They are attacking my weakness." "You." Elena gripped the cold metal of the gun. She had spent her life invisible, scrubbing tables, hiding from debt collectors. Now she was riding into a war zone with the most dangerous man in the city, and she realized with a start that she wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of losing him. They screeched into the parking lot of St. Jude's. It was too quiet. The front desk was empty. A phone was ringing off the hook unanswered. "Stay close," Bronson commanded, drawing his weapon. They moved in a diamond formation. Bronson at point 2, guards at the rear. Leo and Elena in the center. They swept the lobby. Clear. They moved to the elevators. Disabled. Stairs Leo signed. They climbed to the 3rd floor, the memory care unit where Elena's mother lived. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and lavender, usually a comforting scent, now cloying and sickening. The door to room 304 was open. Elena ran forward, forgetting protocol. "Mum!" She burst into the room. Her mother, Maria, was sitting in her wheelchair by the window, humming a song, staring at the birds outside. She was safe. She was unharmed. Elena collapsed to her knees, hugging her mother's waist. "Oh, thank God, thank God." Maria looked down, her eyes cloudy with dementia. "Elena, is that you? Did you bring the soup?" "Yes, Mama, I'm here." Leo entered the room slowly. He didn't look at Maria. He scanned the room. He checked the vents, the closet, under the bed. Nothing. "Why bring us here?" Leo signed to Bronson. If they wanted to kill her, she would be dead. If they wanted to kidnap her, she would be gone. "This is—" Leo stopped. He looked at the television mounted on the wall. It was off, but the little red standby light was blinking. Blink. Blink, blink. Blink. Morse code. Leo grabbed Elena's shoulder and pulled her back. "Get out." He signed violently. But it wasn't a bomb. The TV screen suddenly flickered to life. Static filled the screen, followed by a high-pitched feedback whine that made Eleanor cover her ears. Leo felt the vibration in his teeth. A face appeared on the screen. It wasn't a stranger. It was a man in his late 30s, handsome in a jagged, rough way, wearing a tactical vest. He was sitting in a dark room, illuminated only by the glow of monitors. "Hello, little prince," the man said. Elena gasped. She recognized him, not from the streets, but from the old photos in Vittorio's study. The photos Vittorio had burned. "Who is that?" Elena whispered. Leo's face went pale. He signed a name, his fingers stiff. Gavin Boyd. "Who?" "My father's old enforcer Leo," signed rapidly. "The man who rigged the car bomb that killed my mother. Vittorio blamed the Irish mob, but I always suspected." "Suspected right," the voice on the TV said. The audio was synced to speakers in the room. Gavin could see them. There was a camera hidden in the TV. "You can't hear me, Leo, but your pretty pet can." Gavin sneered. "Tell him, Elena. Tell him I've been waiting for him to grow up." Elena relayed the message, her hands shaking. "Ask him what he wants." Leo signed. "What do I want?" Gavin laughed. "I want what I was promised. Your father hired me to kill your mother. Did you know that she was going to the feds? She was going to rat on the whole operation. Vittorio couldn't do it himself, so he paid me. But he stiffed me on the payment. He exiled me to South America instead of paying the $5 million. Elena felt sick. Vittorio had ordered the hit on his own wife, on Leo's mother. Now, Gavin continued, Vittorio is a vegetable. You have the money. I want my $5 million, plus interest. Let's call it $50 million, in Bitcoin. Transfer it now, or the building comes down. He says the building is rigged, Elena cried out. Leo didn't panic. He looked at the screen, then at the environment. He closed his eyes for a second, feeling the floor. He is lying. Leo signed. No vibration of heavy machinery in the basement. No electronic signature of detonators. He is bluffing about the bomb. But he isn't bluffing about being here. Leo spun around. The window behind Maria shattered. A canister sailed into the room. Flashbang. Boom. White light blinded them. The deafening noise disoriented Bronson and the guards, but Leo, immune to the sound, reacted instantly. He dove over Elena and her mother, shielding them with his body as glass rained down. Ropes dropped from the roof. Men in black tactical gear swung through the broken window. "Secure the target," one of them shouted. They weren't here for the money. They were here for Leo. Bronson fired blindly, taking down one assailant. But there were too many. A taser prong hit Bronson in the neck, dropping him. Leo moved like a whirlwind. He grabbed a shard of heavy glass from the floor and drove it into the leg of the first attacker. He twisted, using the man's momentum to throw him into the wall. But Leo was a strategist, not a soldier. He was outnumbered. One of the men grabbed Eleanor, holding a knife to her throat. "Stop!" the man screamed at Leo. Leo froze. He saw the blade against Eleanor's skin. He saw the terror in her eyes. He raised his hands in surrender. The man on the TV screen laughed. "Good. Bring him to the foundry." A black bag was thrown over Leo's head. "No!" Elena screamed, struggling. "Take me, leave him." The lead mercenary looked at Elena. "The boss wants the whole set. Bring the girl too. Leave the old woman." They pistol-whipped Elena. The world went black. When Elena woke up, the smell of rust and damp earth filled her nose. Her head throbbed. She was tied to a metal chair in what looked like an abandoned factory. Huge smelting pots hung from the ceiling on rusted chains. Rain dripped through holes in the corrugated roof. Leo was tied to a chair opposite her. He was conscious, his cheek was cut, and his lip was bleeding. Gavin Boyd stood between them, holding a remote control. "Wakey, wakey," Gavin said, grinning. He walked over to Leo. He tapped Leo's face. Leo stared at him with cold, murderous eyes. "You know," Gavin said, pacing, "I really did blow up your mother. She screamed for a solid minute before the fire got to the tank. I always wondered if you heard it before your eardrums popped." Elena struggled against her ropes. "You're a monster." "I'm a businessman, sweetheart, and your boyfriend here is holding my retirement fund." Gavin pulled up a laptop. "Access the accounts, Leo. 50 million. Transfer it to this wallet. Then I shoot you and I leave the girl for my men to play with." Leo looked at Elena. He looked at her hands. "Are you hurt?" He signed small movements against his leg. Elena shook her head. "No, just a headache." "Listen to me," Leo signed. "Gavin is arrogant. He thinks I am helpless without a computer. But he forgot who owns this building." Elena looked around. The foundry. It was the old Moretti Steel Works. It had been shut down for years. "Look up," Leo signed. Elena looked up. High above, in the shadows of the rafters, red lights were blinking. Not cameras. Drones. Leo had turned the entire city into his fortress, even the ruins. "I need you to distract him," Leo signed. "Keep him talking for 30 seconds. The drones are waking up from sleep mode. They need a target lock." "What are you two twitching about?" Gavin barked, slapping Leo across the face. "Stop the hand signs." Elena forced a laugh. It was a brittle, crazy sound. Gavin turned to her. "Something funny." "Yes," Elena said, her voice trembling but loud. You think you're a genius, Gavin. You're just a hired gun who got stiffed by a senile old man. You think Leo is afraid of you. Leo isn't afraid of anything. He's looking at you like you're a bug he's about to squash." Gavin's face reddened. He walked over to Elena, leveling his gun at her forehead. "You got a big mouth for a waitress. And you have a small brain for a villain," she spat. "Vittorio didn't pay you because you weren't worth it. You probably botched the job. That's why Leo survived. You failed." "I didn't fail." Gavin screamed, the vein in his neck bulging. "I leveled that car. I am the best demolitions expert in the Midwest." "Target locked," Leo signed. Leo slammed his foot onto the floor. High above, a mechanical whirring sound cut through the air. Gavin looked up. What the 3 heavy-lift industrial drones dropped from the darkness like distinct mechanical hawks. They weren't armed with missiles. They were armed with construction claws. One drone slammed into Gavin, its metal claw gripping his tactical vest and lifting him 5 feet off the ground. Gavin screamed, firing his gun wildly into the ceiling. The other 2 drones swooped down on the guards. The chaos was instant. Leo snapped his wrists, dislocating his thumbs to slip the zip ties. It was a move he had practiced for years. He ignored the pain. He broke free. He lunged for the laptop Gavin had dropped, but he didn't transfer money. He typed one command: override facility security. The rusted chains holding the massive smelting pots groaned. The gears ground together. A 2-ton iron pot swung down from the ceiling, knocking the 2 guards flat. Leo ran to Elena. He pulled a knife from the belt of a groaning guard and cut her ropes. "Run," he signed. "Not without you." Gavin had managed to shoot the drone holding him. He dropped to the floor, gasping for air. He raised his gun, aiming at Leo's back. "Leo!" Elena screamed. She did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed a heavy iron pipe from the floor and swung it with all her might. She hit Gavin in the ribs. A sickening crunch echoed. Gavin grunted, his aim shifting. The bullet grazed Leo's arm. Leo spun around. He saw Elena standing over the mercenary, a pipe in her hands, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. He saw the woman who had poured coffee 3 months ago now, fighting like a lioness for him. Leo walked over to Gavin, who was trying to crawl toward his weapon. Leo kicked the gun away. He placed his boot on Gavin's chest. He didn't sign. He didn't look for Elena to translate. Leo reached down, grabbed Gavin by the throat, and squeezed. He stared into the man's eyes until the light faded from them. It wasn't rage. It was a cold, necessary housekeeping. He let go. Gavin Boyd was gone. The silence returned to the foundry, heavy and final. Leo turned to Elena. Blood dripped from his arm, staining his white shirt. He walked to her. He took the pipe from her shaking hands and dropped it. He pulled her into his chest. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in her scent, shaking slightly. It was the first time she had ever felt him tremble. "I thought I lost you," he signed against her back. His hands moving, unseen by her, but she felt the intent. She pulled back and looked at him. She signed, clumsy but determined. "You will never lose me." Leo looked at her, bloodied and bruised, and smiled. It was a real smile, reaching his eyes. He took out his phone. He typed a message to Bronson. "Clean up on aisle 4. He took Elena's hand. "Let's go home," he signed. "I have a question to ask you." Winter melted into spring, ushering in the silent era. The blood that had stained Chicago during Vittorio's reign was washed away, replaced by the efficient, terrifyingly quiet order of Leo Moretti. 6 months after the foundry, the Moretti estate was unrecognizable. The oppressive drapes were gone, replaced by light. Elena stood before the master suite mirror in a gown of midnight blue silk. She was no longer just a translator. She was the gatekeeper. Leo entered wearing a tuxedo that fit like armor. He stood behind her, his grey eyes softening in the reflection. He placed a small velvet box on the vanity, but he didn't open it. "You look like a weapon," he signed, his movements intimate. "In our world, that is the highest compliment." "Not yet," he added, tapping the box. "First we deal with the ghost." They walked to the east wing, which now smelled of sterile medicine. Vittorio sat in a wheelchair by the window, locked in after a massive stroke. He could see and hear, but he could not move or speak. When he saw Leo, his eyes flashed with distilled hatred and fear. Leo didn't rage. He leaned down close enough for Vittorio to smell the cologne of success. "Translate," Leo commanded. Elena stepped forward, her voice cool and merciless. "Leo wants you to know that profits are up 40%. The Kovacs territory is ours, and the police commissioner is currently enjoying a vacation on our dime." Vittorio's eye twitched helplessly. Leo straightened his father's collar, a gesture of mock tenderness. "He says," Elena continued translating Leo's sharp signs, "that you were right about one thing. Silence is heavy, But you know what else silence is, Father? It is the sound of a man who has no one left to listen to him. Leo turned his back. Goodbye, Vittorio, he signed. They left the door slightly ajar, letting the music from the gala drift in to torture the man who had lost everything. The ballroom was a sea of jewels and power. When Leo and Elena appeared at the top of the grand staircase, the music stopped. The ghost and his siren descended every step a statement. They reached the center podium. Leo looked out at the hundreds of faces, senators, judges, crime bosses, and began to sign. His movements were broad and mesmerizing. "Welcome," Elena voiced her tone, echoing through the hall. "My partner welcomes you to a new Chicago. Tonight we celebrate a future where we do not hide in the shadows. We own the shadows." Leo stopped signing. He looked at the crowd, then turned fully toward Elena. The room went deadly silent. He took a step closer to her, retrieving the velvet box. To the shock of the city's elite, the ruthless Don dropped to one knee. He opened the box. Inside sat a ring of black titanium, inlaid with rare meteorite, dark, unbreakable, and unique. "Elena Corvus," he signed his hands, trembling slightly. "You gave me my voice. You fought for me when I was broken. You bled for me in the foundry." Elena's hands flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "I do not want to rule alone." Leo signed. "I want my queen. Will you marry me?" Elena nodded, tears spilling over. "Yes. Yes, Leo." She reached for him, but Leo held up a hand. He wasn't finished. He stood up, looking deep into her eyes. He took a deep, ragged breath, a breath he hadn't used for speech in 13 years. He placed a hand on his throat to feel the vibration. And then, the unthinkable happened. Leo Moretti spoke. His voice was rough, unused, gravelly, and deep like shifting earth. "I love you." The words were imperfect, slurred by time, but to Elena it was the most beautiful sound in history. She threw her arms around him, kissing him fiercely. The crowd erupted into thunderous applause, flashbulbs popping like fireworks. Leo held her tight. He couldn't hear the cheering. He couldn't hear the music, but he felt her heart beating against his chest, and that was the only rhythm he needed. He looked over her shoulder at the city lights. The arrogant boss had once mocked the waitress, daring her to talk to his deaf son. She had talked. He had listened. And together they had screamed loud enough to shake the world. And that is the story of Elena and the Silent Don. It started with a cruel insult in a restaurant, and ended with the fall of an empire and the rise of a new king. It's a reminder that sometimes the quietest people in the room are the ones you should fear the most and the ones capable of the deepest love. What did you think of Leo's revenge on Vittorio? Was it justice, or was it too cold? And would you have had the courage to sign back to a mafia boss, like Elena did? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have a new thriller coming next week involving a bodyguard and a secret that could destroy London. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching/listening.